Sometimes life takes away more than we think we can bear. Maria was a single mother, an artist at heart. But when her husband died, her world collapsed. She felt invisible, forgotten, and ready to give up. But one Sunday on a park bench, everything began to change. Before we begin, if heartfelt human stories inspire you, please like this video and subscribe. Share it with someone who may feel unseen or unheard. The park was quiet that Sunday morning. The sun had just begun to climb, lighting up the grass with soft golden rays. For most people, it was just another morning. But for Maria, every step she took toward that old wooden bench felt like walking into the past. She had not been there in almost a year. The last time she had sat on that bench, she was not alone. Her husband, David, was beside her. He had always brought coffee in his hands, smiling at her with that easy way of his. Their son had been smaller then, running circles on the grass while they sat side by side, talking about dreams and art. Now David was gone. A sudden illness had taken him, leaving Maria with a child to raise, bills to pay, and a silence that filled every corner of her house. She often told herself she was managing. She got up every day, packed lunches, did her work, kept the house together. But inside, she felt like she had disappeared, invisible, forgotten. She sat down on the bench and looked at her hands. They used to move quickly over sketchbooks, drawing lines, shaping colors. But after David's death, she couldn't bring herself to paint anymore. The brushes sat dry, the canvases blank. And now whispers from relatives filled her ears. Maria can't manage on her own. She should sell the house, move into assisted living. It will be safer for her and the boy. But Maria wasn't old. She wasn't finished. She wasn't ready to be packed away like a forgotten box in the attic. Yet some days she wondered if maybe they were right. She whispered softly, as though David could hear her, "I don't know who I am anymore." That morning, Maria wasn't the only one at the bench. At one end sat a man with quiet eyes, reading a book. His name was Keanu Reeves. Most of the world knew him as a movie star, but here he was just a quiet soul, finding peace in the silence. Beside him was Alexandra Grant, a tall, gentle artist with a sketchbook resting on her lap. Her pencil moved across the page with smooth confidence, her focus sharp but kind. Maria thought about leaving. She didn't want to bother them. She felt too broken, too out of place. But Alexandra looked up and gave her a warm smile. And sometimes that is all it takes, a smile, an invitation to be seen. Maria's voice trembled as she began to speak. First only a little about how she had lost her husband. Then more about how she felt invisible now, like the world had moved on without her. And finally, she confessed her deepest regret. "I was always an artist, but I never really pursued it. I kept putting it aside for work, for bills, for being practical. And now I'm being told maybe it's time I give up. Maybe I should move to a nursing home." Her voice broke. "I don't want to disappear." Keanu closed his book gently and looked at her with quiet compassion. Alexandra reached out, placed her hand over Maria's, and said softly, "You are not invisible, not to us." Maria thought she would feel embarrassed after pouring her heart out to strangers. But instead, she felt lighter. For the first time in months, someone had not just nodded politely or changed the subject. They had listened, really listened, Alexandra leaned closer. "Do you still draw?" she asked. Maria shook her head. "I haven't touched a brush since David passed." Alexandra smiled gently. "Bring your sketches next Sunday, please. I'd love to see them." Maria didn't promise. She wasn't sure she could. But as she walked home that day, her steps felt just a little less heavy. And that night, when her son was asleep, she opened an old drawer and pulled out her sketchbooks. The pages were dusty, yellowed at the corners. But the lines, the shapes, the colors, they were still hers. And as she traced the drawings with her fingers, she realized something. Maybe Alexandra was right. Maybe she wasn't invisible. Not yet. The following Sunday, Maria returned to the bench. She wasn't sure why. Maybe she expected Keanu and Alexandra wouldn't be there. Maybe she told herself it was silly, that strangers didn't care. But when she turned the corner, she saw them. Keanu sitting quietly with his book. Alexandra sketching in her notebook. Both of them looked up, smiled, and moved aside so she could sit between them. This time, Maria carried something in her hands. A sketchbook, old and worn, its cover faded from years of being shoved into drawers and boxes. She clutched it nervously, her fingers tapping against the spine. Alexandra leaned toward her gently. "You brought it." Maria nodded and opened the book. The pages were filled with drawings, faces, flowers, buildings, fleeting moments she had captured when life was busy but still full of love. Alexandra flipped through carefully, treating each page like treasure. "Maria, this is beautiful. Do you see how much heart is in these lines? This isn't just drawing. This is you." For the first time in a long while, Maria smiled. The next Sunday, Alexandra brought a bag. Inside were brushes, paints, and a canvas. She placed them on the bench in front of Maria. "I thought we could paint together," Alexandra said. Maria froze. Her hands trembled. "It's been too long. I won't remember how." Keanu looked at her kindly, his voice low but steady. "Then start with one stroke. That's all it takes. Just one." Maria dipped the brush into blue paint. The color spread across the canvas in a shaky line. She stared at it, uneven, imperfect. But it was real. It was hers. Tears welled in her eyes. "I forgot how much I needed this." And Alexandra smiled. "Then let's not forget again." As the weeks passed, Maria grew more open. She admitted that her house, the place she and David had built a life, was falling apart. A leaky roof, broken steps, windows that rattled in the wind. Relatives told her the same thing. "Sell it. Move to a nursing home. It's safer." But Keanu shook his head. "You don't have to leave your home. Not yet. Not if you don't want to." The following Saturday, he showed up at her doorstep with tools in hand. He wasn't there for cameras, or headlines, or applause. He was just there, quiet and steady, repairing the steps, fixing the handrail, tightening the hinges on the old door. Neighbors watched in surprise, but Maria didn't care about their whispers. She stood at the window, tears in her eyes, watching a stranger treat her home with respect. When he finished, he simply said, "Now you can walk safely. That's what matters." Maria felt something she hadn't in months: dignity. One Sunday, Alexandra suggested something different. "What if we make something together? Not just sketches, not just practice, but a real piece. Something you've always wanted to paint." Maria thought long and hard. Then she said softly, "I always dreamed of painting the park. This bench." the place where I felt most alive with David. So they began. Side by side, Alexandra guided, encouraged, and listened. Maria painted the trees, the sunlight, the birds, the laughter that still seemed to echo. With every brushstroke, she brought back a piece of her heart. Weeks, the canvas grew full of color, memory, and hope. One day Maria stepped back and looked at it. She whispered, "I thought I was invisible, but this proves I'm still here." Alexandra had an idea. She arranged a small art show in the park. Nothing big, just a gathering of neighbors, families, and passersby. They hung Maria's painting under the old tree near the bench. Children stopped to look. Adults admired the colors. A little boy tugged on his mother's sleeve and said, "I want to paint like that." Maria stood quietly, tears streaming down her face, as people saw her, really saw her, not as a widow, not as someone to be tucked away, but as an artist. Her son hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of you, Mom." And in that moment, Maria realized something. She had not disappeared. She was still alive, still strong, and still full of stories to tell through her art. After the small park show, something shifted in Maria. For months, she had walked through life carrying the weight of loss, moving as if the world no longer noticed her. But now, each time she picked up a brush, she felt David's memory with her, not as a shadow pulling her back, but as a quiet hand urging her forward. She began to paint at home again. Not just little sketches, but big, bold canvases. Flowers that seemed to breathe, skies that seemed to stretch beyond the frame. Portraits of her son that captured the hope in his eyes. Her dining table turned into a studio. Her hands, once trembling, grew steady again. She wasn't painting just for herself anymore. She was painting for David, for her son, and for every piece of herself she thought she had lost. One weekend, Keanu returned to the house with a quiet smile and a small gift. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't grand. It was a set of sturdy wooden shelves he had built with his own hands. He installed them along her living room wall. "For your paintings," he said simply. Maria stood back, her mouth trembling into a smile. To her, it wasn't just wood and nails. It was respect. It was someone saying, "Your work matters enough to have a place of its own." She filled those shelves with finished pieces, and for the first time since losing David, her home didn't feel like a museum of the past. It felt like a place still alive with dreams. Meanwhile, Alexandra continued painting alongside Maria. Their project of the park bench grew into something larger. Together, they created a series, not just the bench, but the people who had passed by it, the trees, the pigeons, even the light that changed with the seasons. But Maria insisted on painting one canvas alone. It showed herself on the bench, sitting in silence, with a shadow of David's figure beside her. The shadow wasn't dark, it was warm, painted in golden tones, like sunlight that never fades. When she unveiled it to Alexandra, her voice was steady. "This isn't just about what I lost, it's about what still stays with me." Alexandra hugged her tightly. "Maria, you've created something only you could. This is your voice, and the world deserves to hear it." The whispers from relatives continued. She can't keep living alone. She should move into a care home. But Maria no longer let those voices define her. With Keanu's help, her home was safe again. With Alexandra's help, Her art was alive again. With her own courage, she had proven that her life wasn't over. It was unfolding into something new. One Sunday, she looked at Keanu and Alexandra and said softly, "Thank you. Not just for helping, but for seeing me when I thought I was invisible." Keanu gave one of his quiet nods. Alexandra smiled with that steady warmth, and Maria knew she was no longer a woman fading into the background. She was standing in the light. Months passed. The seasons shifted, but every Sunday, Maria still returned to that same park, her sketchbook under her arm. Sometimes Keanu and Alexandra were there. Sometimes they weren't, but the bench had changed for her forever. It was no longer just a place of memories. It was a place of renewal. She often painted there, and strangers would pause to watch. Some asked about her work. Some asked about her life. And Maria found herself listening to their stories, just as Keanu and Alexandra had listened to hers. The bench had given her a gift, and now she passed it on. Maria's story reminds us of something simple, yet powerful. Grief does not mean the end of life. Loneliness does not mean invisibility. And regrets do not mean it's too late. With kindness, with listening, with small acts of action, a broken spirit can be mended. Maria didn't just find her art again. She found herself again. And if you're watching this, carrying your own silence, your own grief, or your own regrets, remember Maria's story. It is never too late to pick up the brush, to rebuild your home, to begin again. Sometimes all it takes is a park bench, a listening ear, and someone who believes in you.